Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kyler Canastra.
And I'm Shaheen Samavati. We're your hosts of the Content Mix podcast.
Today, we're going to be talking all about automating and streamlining content processes. For global marketing directors, it's hard enough to create a constant flow of high-quality content in one language. And when working in multiple languages, the process becomes even more complex. And making the process smoother and more automated can save a business large amounts of marketing budget.
But how is it done exactly? We have just the person with us today to shed light on this topic. James Scherer is the VP of Strategy at Codeless. It's a content marketing agency specialized in large-scale content production for software and software as a service companies. And as VP of Strategy, he oversees the marketing strategies of well-known brands in the space like Monday.com and ActiveCampaign.
So welcome to the show, James. We're happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to this.
So let's jump right into the topic. First of all, James, how much content do you think growth-minded companies need to be producing per month? And at what point do you start to see real ROI in investing in automation tools?
Okay, how much content should a company be producing in a given month? I would say the amount of, I would say you should be producing the amount of content that you have opportunity to create, that are legitimate opportunities for you to drive traffic, ranking positions, leads, and sales. If you're in a space that has a huge volume of those topics, which we're not all in necessarily, if you are, however, then you should be publishing at least, I would say, 8 pieces of content for the first kind of 12 months of content production. You can scale that down once you have kind of identified the primary topics within your space, created content around them, optimize the content for those key phrases. You can scale down to 4. But, then again, Monday.com did 75 a month for the first 8 months of working with us. But they're in a space, they're in one of those industries where they do, project management software, CRM, sales funnel optimization, customer support. So because they are so large and they have so many different departments that they kind of have services aligned towards, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of opportunities from a content perspective in that space. But they are, not every business has that kind of volume, that breadth of opportunity. Either way, though, I would recommend most businesses create volume of content in early days with their investment to kind of rank as much as possible, index your content early, backlink to it with support content, a higher volume of this. And then, after months 9 to 18 is really about optimization, continuing to create support content, identifying what you have, where it is, what could be done to add to it. So that can be the scale down period. But throughout all of this, automation starts at the beginning. I don't think that there's a certain date at which automation starts to deliver a positive ROI, because right off the bat, we're talking about time saving. So ignore everything else. We're talking about how long does it take you or a freelancer perhaps to create a high quality long form blog article from scratch. And the answer is with automation, with some of the tools that we may talk about today, that process is slimmed down from 8, 10, 12 hours to hopefully around 4 to 6 to create a really high quality piece of content. Which immediately is a positive ROI.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Depending on how much the tool costs, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the kind of what I was getting at with that question is is automating your content process something that every company should consider? I just suppose it depends on how big of a priority content marketing is for you and where that, obviously if you're doing a certain volume, then it makes sense, right?
it also comes down to how are we defining automation of content. I mean, there is everything from, if we're talking about using software to help you create content and streamline the content production process, then the little red line on one word processor is helping you write more effectively. Grammarly is helping you write more effectively. That is software that helps you create content, high quality content. On the other end of the spectrum, we have full automation tools like Jasper, tools like Phrase has, right? Market News. All these platforms have. We will write an article from scratch for you. You just give us some key phrases and some description. That's the other end of the spectrum. In the middle is, for me at least, and this is kind of how we're currently using automation, using those tools to inspire our freelance writers to create outlines based on the ranking competition. So that feels to me currently like the win in terms of using automation effectively to allow them to still be creative and create something novel, but know that the structure of their article is based on what's ranking, and then they can add to that structure. But yeah, the automation cost question really depends on how we're using. Are we using it to create all of our content, or are we using it to streamline the production process?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I was going to ask James too, like, because we're talking about, content production, and depending on the industry, depending on where the company is at in terms of how much they want to invest, you recommend a certain amount of articles a month. And I'm sure sometimes a company is going to say, like, how are we going to do this? And like the tools, like what tools we're going to use. So when a new client comes to you at Codeless, like, what are the areas that you typically recommend to be streamlined first, and why, in terms of the production itself?
I mean, so it's more that when a client comes to us, they're coming to us for us to create their content from scratch. So I have done some consulting with clients, but the production process and the model that I kind of pitch is based off of the model that we use in-house. Okay. So Codeless has a very small core group of like salaried employees who are our core team. And then we have anywhere between 75 and 100 freelance writers and another half dozen editors. And the process that we use is very, very built around a project management tool. So we use ClickUp, though we've used Pipefy in the past. We've used Notion, like Money.com, there's a lot of these project management tools that kind of show where everything is at and allow you to assign, stages of the production process to people. And I would say that visibility is crucial. So anybody looking to create content, having don't just assign a piece out and then say, hey, can you give it back to me when it's done? I would say have the process be clearly delineated within a project management tool where the writer is assigned a topic and provided whatever you kind of need to provide them in order for them to create high quality content. We provide writers with not just a client-specific writer's guide, but also our internal standards for images, our internal standards for linking, the client's internal link preferences and priorities. The complete guide for how the client wants em dashes and semicolon, all of the stuff that makes it a piece for them. They do an outline. That is they either have the option to do it of their own accord or to use one of the automation tools that we have give them access to. Then our editorial team edits or reviews that outline prior to draft, just so we feel confident they're going the right direction. The angle is the right one. Then they draft. Sometimes clients actually review the outlines as well. Then they draft. Then we go through 2 rounds of edits. And I guess what I'm saying here is that, look, while our process is relatively comprehensive, it is extremely comprehensive. It is also the process that puts as much of the onus for the time-consuming tasks and the onerous tasks on the affordable freelance writer and the software itself, which means that the editorial staff or CMO, whoever it is, has very little time. Their time isn't taken up with managing this process. It is a set process that the writers just kind of like understand. This is how it all flows, and at the end of it, everybody doing their part, you get a really high quality piece of content.
For sure. I really like what you said about like the whole concept of visibility, like making sure you're clear from like the first step of the process until the end and every step of the way. So, or in order to like avoid those, mishaps happening and people misunderstanding instructions. And so it seems like you have a very clear and visible process that like using these.
Also, the deadline is visible there, the whole time, and each stage has the deadline. So when the editor gets it, they know that they need to get that back to the writer in the next 2 days in order for the writer to hit their deadline, which is in 5.
Right. So and do you have the client directly in the project management app as well? So they're
a lot of our
overseeing
clients
this
are there,
as well?
Yeah. I mean, they have a certain level of visibility and a certain level of access. But we do, they can add comment. If they do outline review, they can add comments not just to the Google Doc where the outline lives, but also within the card itself where the task lives. And they can say, hey, can you make sure that you include our product in this section, please? And the writer says, so, yeah.
Yeah. So collaboration is key to your success then amongst the client and the writer, everyone involved. It has like a very clear role in the collaboration as well.
Yeah.
That's great.
So we're like in a very similar business, as you know. So of course, our focus is more on multilingual projects, where I think you're doing more work in English and more focused on the service and software as a service industries. But I was curious, I mean, do you have any thoughts about multilingual content creation and whether there's more challenges or is it harder to automate, or is it better to automate, I guess, than a monolingual project? Obviously, I have some thoughts on that, but
I would love to hear your thoughts. Well, my belief would be that it would be far more challenging, simply because the platforms that are currently, enabling content automation, I would imagine, would be English-focused platforms. So they're identifying, like, for instance, one of the main tools we use to optimize content for SEO or for search is Phrase. And Phrase identifies you put in your drafted content and it checks the top 20 search results for a given key phrase and tells you what you're missing. And for anybody out there, it's a pretty reasonable tool. There are a number of them. They are very helpful to create search-oriented content. I would imagine that a tool like that is recommending semantic key phrases only in English and based on English Google. So those automate, like it's an automation, but it's one of those, for me, it's one of those tools that expedite the creation of high quality content. And I would be surprised if many of those platforms were focused on, the international market as anywhere near as much as they were on the English. But
we've definitely seen that. Like, for example, like a lot of our content that we create is based on interviews. So we get like a recorded interview, and then one thing that we tend to automate is the like getting an automatic transcription that makes it more quick to get like to extract content from the video, but we found much better tools for that in English than in other languages. We're just like starting to see tools that work in other languages, but the way they work in the other languages tends not to be as good as in English. I mean, everyone puts like the emphasis on English. So
I mean, that's the challenge. But I mean, we're also talking about a market that is very early days. I mean, as far as those platforms that do entire content automation from scratch, tools like Jasper or within the Phrase, their AI generated content tool it says beta next to it. Market Muse is always one of those platforms. They're also, all of these guys are just like, this is a thing we think could be cool in the future. This is where we're currently at with it. And so I would be, what I'm saying is that from like the complete creation side of things, I haven't yet found a platform that's there on the English side. So I think we're probably a couple of years out. I would be amazed if you guys were, more like 10.
Totally. It's like early days, even for English. Yeah.
For sure. Now, not only do we have like work in similar businesses, but we also are all from North America. We're all from the United States, and we're all working in Europe. So we always like try to ask, other Americans that are working in Europe how their experience was. So we want to know, James, a bit more about how you ended up in the UK and how your experience is working as an American abroad.
For sure. So I went to university in Canada, and there I met an exchange student from the UK whose name was Hannah. And we got on quite well. And we've been married we've been together for 14 years.
Oh, wow.
And we've been married for the past 4. And she's from here in the UK. And so we, after university, kind of bounced around a little bit and moved back to Canada together for 6 years to Vancouver, Canada, and loved it there. But then wanted to settle down and actually buy a place, and that's just not an option for a lot of people in Vancouver. It has those San Francisco vibes to a certain extent. But we kind of wanted to do a traveling year before settling down. And I'd been in the content space for 6-7 years by that point. And I was at that time head of inbound for a SaaS company in Vancouver. But I went back to writing freelance while we traveled, and I started writing freelance writing for a company called Codeless, and they, do content production for a number of companies. And I really enjoyed it. But when, we traveled the world, and it was really amazing and expensive and awesome, because we chose we did New Zealand and Australia and stuff, rather than go to a beach in Thailand and hide for 6 months. No. So I guess I kind of kept working throughout it. And, but then when we settled down here in the UK, I expressed an interest in a more permanent role. And so came on as director of editorial here at Codeless. So that was overseeing the editorial team, as well as kind of guiding our writers through the process and making sure that process was understandable and comprehensive. And then in January, went to the VP role. And so now it's just overseeing our client strategies across the board, which is really, really exciting. I think it's, I don't know how you guys feel about agency work, but having been in-house, I don't think I could go back. I think that it's just too dynamic and interesting and fun to work with and try to figure out the challenges and nuances of a bunch of different clients. And, when you get a new one, you have this whole new experience of okay, what can we do here? What are the opportunities? What are they currently doing? How can we improve that? Which is a process that I absolutely love, and that you only get once when you're in-house, when you first get there. So I don't think I'm going back anytime soon.
That's funny too, because for me, besides the lovely love story that you have with your now wife, I was actually a freelance translator and writer for Vera Content, and kind of had a similar experience. Kind of asked for a permanent role, and here I am, 4 years later. But how was that experience? I think for me, when I was, I worked as a linguist, but also as a project manager, working with different clients. Having that experience working with content itself has been so rewarding for me, even in my role now. So I was just wondering, how is your experience working as an editor? Impacting your role on a daily basis, I guess, in your new position?
It's interesting. I mean, I wrote for so long, and then I was an editor for so long. And out of the two of them, I would still say that I love writing. I'm definitely a nitpicky person as far as content goes. I have high standards for what quality looks like, but my love is in the creative side of things. But I also like bossing people around, and I like the strategy side of content. I would say what helps me is, and I think what this is, it's trite and cliche, but every CEO should work in customer service for a week. Every VP should be on the mailroom floor for a week. I think everybody who is managing content strategy or content production should have been a writer, tapping the electrical, pen against their forehead, trying to figure out how to put another paragraph down. Because I do think that understanding what can be a quite painful process, content production, helps you as a manager create processes that make that process less painful. So for me, it's been emphasizing that I strive to get our writers everything they need, everything they can possibly need, so they don't need to ask questions, so they don't need to come to somebody. So when they get a piece of content, it's not just a topic, it's not just a key phrase, it's everything that they need to create high quality content, and then a process that makes that easy for them to check that they've done all those things. We have a checklist process within our project management tool, specific to each client. So when they're assigned a piece for Money.com or ActiveCampaign, they are completing a different checklist so that they feel confident not just with what they've been given, but also that they are doing exactly what is required and not going to have to do any rewriting, not going to do any redrafting. Their outline is approved, so there's no concern that they're going to do 2,500 words and have to do another 2,500 words that are different. And it's all built on, having been in the content trenches, for 6 years, putting in my time and knowing how painful it can be.
Exactly. And I feel like for me and my experience too, like the best clients to work with were the ones that had that hands-on experience with content, because they understand exactly like the ins and out, and they understand the process, I think. And so like from their briefs to their understanding of like, oh, we need more time with this for X and Y reason, like they're just much more on board because they understand the process. So I do think like it's a very helpful tool in our cases, right, to have been on the ground doing that work and now like overseeing a lot more in terms of strategy and stuff like that. It helps a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sure.
I was going to make a similar comment. I think like a lot of companies like nowadays, I mean, everybody wants to be a publisher because everyone knows that it's like necessary, like you need to be putting content out there. But a lot of them don't understand like what is the whole process that's behind that and how much work it actually is. Like it does require, like you said, it has all these steps and all these processes that need to be like super solid so that you're like consistently able to put out consistently good work. And
it's a weird space, isn't it, though, because there's there's when somebody says, hey, I want to publish some content, the content on offer is everything from like $50 for a 2,000 word article. You give them a headline and they'll do it. You can go on Fiverr or wherever and get that piece written, all the way up to, I mean, we charge $1,500 for our lower volume content plans. So that comes with strategy and with images and with SEO. It's search optimization. We do CMS uploads, but it's a huge investment on a per piece basis. And so for a lot of these businesses being like, so what is the difference between a $50 article that I get somebody to write me and what you're doing? And the difference is monumental in how it's created, who creates it, what the expertise is, what the piece looks like, how it's delivered, how there's a lot of there's a lot that goes into content production at that level, for sure.
And anyone who's worked in content creation knows that, right? So that's what Kyler was saying. When you have a client that's been in the trenches, they appreciate it and they value it. And but when it's a client maybe that doesn't know the difference between one and the other, they're like, why wouldn't I get the cheaper one? Right? So.
Exactly. And then they publish like dozens and dozens of those articles, and after a year, they're like, why isn't content marketing working for me? And we're like, well, are any of your articles linked? Are any of them optimized for search? Are any of them good? Do you have any images? Maybe we go back into some of these URLs.
That's so true.
But on the topic of like outsourcing versus like having an in-house team, obviously that's something that a lot of companies debate. I don't know what's your thoughts on that. I think they need to have at least one person in-house who knows something about content marketing, but then the rest could potentially be outsourced. But yeah,
no, I would agree. I would say having either have somebody in-house who understands on some level content marketing, or find an agency who you trust completely and that agency should be responsible for strategy alongside production. When I first got to Codeless, we were just doing production. So the clients gave us the plan, gave us the topics, and we just wrote them and delivered them. But when I came in, it was really important to me that also from a kind of a selfish business perspective, I wanted to be involved in the decision making, so that the success they saw, I could take credit for, genuinely from a sales perspective. Whereas if they saw success with our content, or a lot of our clients didn't see success with our content because there was no promotional element, there was no conversion optimization on the page itself, because we weren't involved in any of that side of things. But to your question, I often kind of use the analogy. It's like you can either try to do the electrical wiring in your home on your own, or you can hire in somebody whose job it is to do electrical wiring. And one of those scenarios will result in you having working power, and one of those scenarios may get you electrocuted.
Right.
And I think on some level that all marketing, if you go with an agency who's good at what they do, then that is what they do. That is their profession. They are experts in this. So when we talk about Codeless being like a content production or content marketing agency for SaaS, not specifically SaaS, but the majority of our clients are SaaS. It's like all our team does, all we are built to do is produce high quality content for your business. We do not do advertising. We do not do page design. We do not do conversion rate optimization. We do really high quality content for businesses exactly like yours, and we've seen success with businesses like yours. And I guess that's the difference, is that when you hire an agency, you hire an expert in a specific space. Whereas I think when you have an in-house team, they, by definition, unless you're substantial, are going to be doing other stuff. When I was head of inbound at a SaaS company, I was not just doing, content production and content strategy. I was also doing conversion rate optimization. I was also doing, email drip campaign creation. I was also doing marketing automation, optimization. I was also involved in the video side of things when we tried that for a little while. I was involved in the podcasting thing for a while and we tried that. There's a lot of, whenever you're in-house, you are inevitably pulled into 14 different directions. Whereas when you go with an agency who does something specific, then they do that thing specifically and they do it really well. And you know that what you're investing is going exclusively to driving success in that place. And I think that will as a result deliver a more positive ROI than if you invest in somebody similar kind of cost from a salary perspective to then be pulled in 14 different directions.
Yeah, I do think I completely agree with you about you have to focus on your core competency. And I think there's a few exceptions of companies who decided okay, we're going to become expert content producers, and you have Red Bull Media House or, these brands that have created their own content production divisions, but you basically have to do that, build your own agency internally if you want to be able to do the same kind of work 100%. That an agency would do for you. So that's a strategic question, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure. Now, I also, before we wrap up the conversation, I just wanted to know a bit. We talked about AI tools before, but I wanted to know, James, in your perspective, which ones have you tried? Which ones have you found more useful? And do you find see that AI tools are useful for content creation and especially for B2B brands looking to create some thought leadership?
For sure.
Yeah, the question to follow up on that, the question there is are AI tools actually useful? Can you create good content with an AI tool? I think people are getting this idea that there's tools out there that'll just make the articles for you. And we've found that's not really the case, at least not yet. But
I have also found that is not yet the case by any stretch of the imagination. I have tried Jasper and Phrase and Market Muse. And unfortunately, okay, going back to what makes a good article, let's ignore everything except the SEO side of things, which I know is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the only variable that we judge good quality. But let's say SEO. When it comes to SaaS and B2B content, all content actually, Google rewards novelty. They reward thought leadership. They reward bringing something new to the table. We have, in the past, created content that is essentially rewrites of what's ranking already. It doesn't surpass anything that's there because it is exactly the same, and your domain ranking is probably lower, right? New content that says something new and brings something new to the table ranks, so long as it's also, talking about all of the other stuff that it needs to talk about. By definition, AI, created content can't bring something new to the table. All they're doing is regurgitating the ranking content. It can't have ideas. And I think that for Google, they've been very clear with us about what they are rewarding when they rank content. And it is not just quality. It's not just your meta descriptions, your meta titles, and making sure that you have low size images that are, whatever. It's not just your page speed. It is also the ability to bring something creative to the table on this subject matter. And AI can't do that and will never be able to do that, no matter how good they get at adapting existing content into something quote unquote new for a draft. It's not going to be new. It can't be new. So unless they get somebody to an AI that can have new ideas, which is a whole different thing, and we should all probably run for the hills, we're going to be okay for a little while. Does that mean that AI can't help you create great content? No, it can, you can populate an outline relatively quickly from the ranking content. know what subheads, create a comprehensive piece of content, and then add your own creativity to them. Add in pieces of your own, voice, your own brand, and then your novel idea, your novel spin on it to an existing outline. Sure, I'm fine with that.
Right.
But the creation of content, like a long form article, not yet.
Yeah, it needs some human intervention for sure.
Yeah.
Can I ask the last final question, Kyler? Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
No, just to because we're kind of saying what can't be automated. Maybe if you could, because at the beginning you started out talking about what could be automated, but maybe you could reiterate like what, I don't know, what's been like your eureka, like, okay, it was amazing when we figured out how to automate this thing. Or is there any that like, the things that you think are the best to automate or that, to leave on?
Yeah. So I would say there's a number of places that we have automation within our production process. The first is automatically assigning content to the person who's responsible for that stage of production is really, really handy. We use ClickUp for that. Then we use Google Docs for all content creation, and then we also have CMS uploads within our contracts. And there's an automation tool called Wordable that takes Google Doc content and moves it into WordPress or a number of other CMS platforms automatically. It just like you connect the two tools or the three tools as like a middleman, like a Zapier equivalent almost. And it like just sees your content within it, and you say upload, and it just goes. And it takes meta descriptions and images and meta titles and all that kind of stuff. And that's actually, just to be clear, that's a company that we're also associated with and affiliated with, but it's a SaaS side of things that I'm not involved in, but a big fan of from a what they deliver perspective. So that's a great one. Also, we do use not necessarily automations, but there are a number of tools that take some of the human error out of editorial work and on optimization. So currently, we use a tool called writer.com, which actually allows you to import client-specific or, if you're in-house, like your own brand-specific style guidelines into the tool, and it'll check draft content against those guidelines. So it's like Grammarly, but up a notch. We use ProWriting Aid. We use AutoCrit for plagiarism checking, which is kind of an automation of like, so you don't have to pour through the internet of your own code, I guess, kind of. We use Phrase for SEO. So that's checking our content against ranking competition and making sure that we're including subject matter wise what the ranking competition is, the ranking content is. And yeah, Wordable to take those optimized pieces of content and moving them into the CMS automatically is but honestly, just like any tool that saves you time and is going to save you money. So there are a number of them out there, and a lot of them do fantastic work. So
it's kind of the way you use those tools and how you create that entire process that creates efficiency.
And also, like, depending on how much you're doing, we do 300 pieces of content a month. So what we do and how we do it may not be how you necessarily need to. But I would say that it doesn't, like, even if I was doing 8 pieces of content a month, I would still use ClickUp to manage it. I would still use Phrase to make sure my stuff was up to scratch SEO wise. I would still use Grammarly or writer.com, and I would still use, Wordable to upload all the CMS, because the tools aren't like, none of those tools are actually that expensive at all. And they make it a whole lot easier no matter how much you're doing.
Yeah. So going back to that ROI question, it is worth, even on a small scale content production. I mean, it's not that big of an investment, and it is going to save you a lot of time. So it's probably worth looking into a lot of these tools.
Absolutely.
Regardless. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that unfortunately wraps up the conversation for today. And it was really great to connect with someone else in our industry as well. So it was great to have your perspective and kind of learn from you during this conversation. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to say, maybe I want to get in touch with James to learn more about him or about what he's doing at Codeless. So where could people get in touch with you? Is LinkedIn the best option, or?
Yeah, LinkedIn is good, but I'm also, clearly I love talking about this stuff. So honestly, like, I'm down for people to email James at, codeless.io. Just, maybe put the podcast name in the subject line or something. Otherwise I'll wonder if you're spamming me, but yeah, a cold outreach email looks very similar to like a genuinely enthusiastic email. So
That's true.
maybe those are landing in there. But yeah, I'm totally down to have email conversations with people. But LinkedIn is also great. I'm on Twitter at JD Scherer. Yeah, all the places I'm around.
And like you said, codeless.io is the company website, right?
Yeah.
You can find out more there about your agency. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, James. It's been great having you.
Thank you guys so much. Me and Kyler, that was fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah, we definitely for sure. And I just want to thank everybody else too for listening in. And as always, for more perspectives on global content marketing, be sure to check out our website at veracontent.com/mix. And if you'd like to get in touch with any of us, or if you have any interesting topic for an upcoming episode, you can also reach out to us at mix@veracontent.com, and keep tuning to the podcast for more interviews with content experts. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks again, James.